This one is near and dear to my heart because I've seen friends go down this path and be the victim of the opioid crisis when it happened. I had friends die with needles in their arms and stuff like that. Being a hobo as I am, I'm walking, town to town, causing trouble. Yeah, I met some shady characters that love their drugs, and I come to love these people dearly and called them friends, and it turned around and bit them on the behind. And this was during this time. So this article reads how the opioid sales quadrupled between 1999 and 2010, with 91 Americans dying daily from opioid overdoses. So that was 91 people a day were dying from fentanyl or whatever was Oxycoton at the time. In the early days, Oxycoton, and then moved on to the harder stuff. So let's read this. And if anybody's got any commentary on it, just let me know in the comments, because I'm no stranger to the kind of lifestyle of living fast and dying young. I totally get it. So, in a span of over a decade, from 1999 to 2010, the United States witnessed a staggering quadrupling of opioid sales. This dramatic surge in availability set the stage for one of the most devastating public health crises in recent American history. By 2010, the consequences of this flood of opioids into the market had become tragically clear. 91 Americans were dying every day from opioid overdoses. Now, the roots of this crisis can be traced back to the early 1990s, when pharmaceutical companies began aggressively marketing opioid pain relievers. These companies assured the medical community that patients would not become addicted to these prescriptions, leading to significant increase in their prescription rates. So as they're prescribing them, they're reassuring regulatory agencies and other people that are concerned, saying, no, they're fine. They're not like your daddy's heroin, and this is different. Doctors under pressure to treat pain more effectively and influenced by what we now know as misleading information began prescribing these powerful drugs at unprecedented rates. Now, the devastation from the opioid crisis and corporate malfeasance by pharmaceutical companies is vast, okay? Opioid sales quadrupled between 1999 and 2010. By 2010, there were over 16,000 deaths involving prescription opioids at a rate of 5.4 per 100,000 people. That's a lot, if you don't know. Between 1999 and 2017, nearly 400,000 people died from opioid overdoses in the United States. So that's a pretty doggone big number. You have, 350 million people in America? 400,000 people, that's a big chunk. In 2010, there were about 940,000 emergency department visits by women for drug misuse or abuse. So, it's in a failing empire, the drugs are one of the only things that keeps us from actually understanding how bad our situation has gotten. Deaths from opioid pain relievers increased fivefold for women between 1999 and 2010. So this really affected women. I knew a girl in St. Louis. She let me stay at her house when I was traveling through, and she died that night. I was at her house, and her friends said maybe somebody should go check on her downstairs. And somebody went downstairs. She was in a pile of her own vomit, and she made it, but she still didn't have a great life after that. That was pretty damning. I knew the damage of opioid abuse has been all around me my whole life. I've lost really good friends. Purdue Pharma spent $200 million in 2001 alone on marketing Oxycontin. In 2010, enough opioid pain relievers were sold to medicate every adult in the United States with a typical dose for every 4 hours for a month. That means somebody was taking their fair share. Wow, that's a lot. So Purdue Pharma, of course, by 2019, there was over 2,500 lawsuits that had been filed against Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family for their role in the opioid crisis. The Sackler family agreed to pay $4.5 billion in a settlement related to their role in the epidemic, but they tried to weasel out of it by declaring bankruptcy. Which the judge actually just threw that out and said, you're not just going to declare bankruptcy and get out of this. And if you guys don't know, the Sackler family was a really deranged family of pharmaceutical guys. I don't know. I guess they were doctors, but not much of a doctor if they decided that they would rather poison everybody. And I think they got their start with Valium, which was the drug of choice in the 60s and 70s to treat housewives that weren't obedient.
Jesus.
And that became a thing. And it didn't come to a head until finally, the problem with Valium became so widespread that the first lady ended up being addicted to Valium, and she had to go into treatment. And that's where you get the Betty Ford Center. I'm pretty sure she was the one that she didn't know where she was half the time. And the doctors kept telling her that the drugs are fine, there's nothing wrong with you, you just shut up, take your pills. But she was losing giant pieces of time. She had this interview that I saw recently, and she was saying, I didn't know where I was, didn't know what was happening. Opioids, flooded into communities across the nation. Addiction rates, of course, they soared. Families watched helplessly as loved ones fell into the grip of opioid dependence. You had guys that would get prescribed pills from the doctor and then not be able to get any more and go out and look for heroin because the pain in their back was so bad or whatever. It just became widespread. The human toll of the crisis extends far beyond the daily death count. For every fatal overdose, there are dozens of non-fatal overdoses, leaving each traumatized families constrained with community resources or permanent disabilities. The economic impact is also equally severe, with billions spent on health care and addiction treatment and law enforcement and jailing people. And when there is a direct correlation between poverty and drug use, like I was saying before, people who are not poor are more likely to enjoy their life to a degree where they don't feel the need to sedate themselves to get through it. There's plenty of evidence to back that up.
Or if they're rich enough that they can do drugs with impunity because they're above the law, they also are able to get them safer or in dosages that are more appropriate so that they don't die from them. The Wolf of Wall Street guy stereotype.
Right. You could do it out in the open. You can get the right education. You don't have to do it. A lot of the reasons why junkies die sometimes from sharing needles because they can't afford to get another one because they're poor. There became these needle exchange programs, and that brought in an incredible amount of brought down the amount of disease and deaths and stuff caused from sharing needles. You could easily treat this, but I get why the conservatives say, well, it's not my problem, it's only my deal. But if you want, heroin junkies shitting in cardboard boxes and spraying blood all over motel walls, and you could easily try to get these people in a place that's going to actually help them and actually maybe change some of these bad things about their life. But it also starts with capitalism being destroyed because you can't have poverty. You can't have poverty and expect people to be happy. Because then once people are impoverished, they're fucking drunk. And then they're surly, or they're angry, or they're on meth and driving a truck through the night. Whatever. I don't know. So as awareness grew, so did the efforts to combat it. So news articles started coming out. They say, we got this crisis, people are dying. They implemented prescription drug monitoring programs, while federal agencies cracked down on what they called pill mills, which was basically what they were. They were little more than fronts for opioid distribution, kickbacks from doctors, such and such. The medical community began to reassess its approach to pain management, seeking alternatives to opioid where it was possible. But of course, profit is a great thing, so it never actually stopped, and we still have huge problems today. The crisis continues to evolve. As access to prescription opioids tightened, many turned to illicit opioids like heroin, leading the new wave of epidemic. The introduction of potent synthetic opioids like fentanyl into the drug supply has made the crisis even deadlier. So during the crisis, you have people saying Oxycoton, it's sweeping everywhere, it's killing all these people, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. So what they did is they came up with a new opioid that was even stronger to say, can we kill everyone a little faster, a little more efficiently? And can we get it to where they're like zombies, where they're half of their body is hanging down and their legs are just like stiff and holding them up? The junkie is a liberal animal. I'm sorry, is a limber animal. Like it, junkies and crackheads, they can dance and so heroin junkies, they can stay on 2 feet no matter how sleepy they are. It's incredible. I lived on Skid Row too long, folks. I have a lot of opinions about all the beautiful, colorful characters that you see when you're poor. So I wanted to go over with you guys some commonly overprescribed medications, okay? I mentioned Valium before. You ever heard of Xanax?
Mm-hmm.
Benzodiazepines. These are the prescriptions nearly doubled over a 12-year period. Yeah, Jordan Peterson famously took them, and that's what makes him so smart, I guess. And then when he tried to get off of them, he had to actually go to a Russian doctor to be put into a drug-induced coma for like a week in order to beat the withdrawal symptoms of benzodiazepines. So these are really strong, I don't know what you call it, antidepressant, antipsychotic, anti-whatever, feel-bad drugs. Xanax, Valium, Ativan. They're highly overprescribed. You also have stimulants like Adderall, Ritalin, particularly for ADHD, with the U.S. accounting for over 80% of the global ADHD medication use. So the United States is like user number one. You got antidepressants, which are often prescribed for mild depression or off-label uses, with pharmaceutical companies pushing for broader use. You know, I've heard stories about people going in and saying, I feel fat. And they say, well, an antidepressant will help you. It's like, oh, yeah, now I don't feel anything at all about anything. That was like the joke. I was like, what's the cure to, like, how do you stop your neighbor's dog from barking? You say, do some heroin. You won't even notice that the dog is barking.
Oh my God.
So statins, I was talking to Robert Whitaker, the guy from Mad in America. He said the statins don't do jack diddly squat. They're a heart blood pressure thing, I think. While beneficial for many, there's debate about their widespread use for primary prevention of low-risk individuals. So they just want to put people on statins just to be safe. Like they used to tell people, well, just take an aspirin a day for your heart. But in reality, that's like the worst advice you could give anybody, because a lot of aspirin and ibuprofen and stuff, it kills your kidneys and your liver and stuff. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that, folks. Proton pump inhibitors, I don't even know what that is. Prilosec and Nexium often prescribe long-term heartburn, extended short-term use. Weird stuff, people. Weird stuff. I take a Tums. When I'm feeling acid reflux, call me old-fashioned. Testosterone, marketed heavily for low T, leading to widespread use in men without clear medical need. Of course, you guys lifting weights and shit, you want to look all tough and have these useless muscles like you're going to the work at the factory. Here, let me tell you something, folks. The factory got shut down years ago. If you want good factory work, go to China.
I love seeing like a jacked car salesman. That's always entertaining to me. It's like, why, dude?
Yeah, think of the most effeminate kind of profession, and then think of him like super muscular. Like,
congrats, bro.
Yeah, man, you're doing the Lord's work here. Yeah. Well, antipsychotics, antibiotics. That's another big one. It's the antibiotics. We're prescribing them willy-nilly. They're going into the waterways. They're becoming less effective. It's also a thing where our medicine system is broken, clearly, from this whole... That's what I'm gathering from this whole article, right? So, and I'll tell you just a little bit more about the top 10 drug companies here. It's Pfizer, worth $100 billion. They're number one. Johnson & Johnson comes in next at $94 billion. Roche, $66 billion. Merck, which is a German company over here, $59 billion. AbbVie, not explicitly listed, but in the top 5. Novartis, of course, I think they have the monopoly on insulin, if I'm not mistaken. Bristol Myers Squibb, Eli Lilly, of course, that's the insulin mafia. Novo Nordisk, that's also part of the insulin mafia, and Amgen. So I'm not entirely sure what all drugs they make, but those are the big top offenders when it comes to drugging us with all these wonderful drugs that they've been giving us. So as always, Mike, I'm going to read you my take on it, my critical analysis. The Pharmaceutical Folies, a prescription for profit. In the style of American capitalism, few things are as brazenly partial as the pharmaceutical industry's ongoing dominance in our mind and body. Here we have an ensemble of corporate jesters adorned with the ill-fitting robes of benevolence, prancing about the stage while picking the pockets of a captive audience. Consider, if you will, the spectacle of Martin Shkreli, the farmer bro turned jailbird, being temporarily sprung from his cage to enlighten the bright young minds at Harvard Business School. One can only imagine the pearls of wisdom he imparted. Lesson 1, aspiring capitalists. Find a life-saving drug, jack up the price by 5,000%, and voila, you too become a reviled millionaire. The fact that this modern-day Mephistopheles was deemed to fit a lecture in one of our most hallowed institutions of higher learning speaks volumes about the moral bankruptcy of our era. But Shkreli is merely a sideshow in this circus of avarice. The true ringmasters are the pharmaceutical behemoths who, with the deftness of skilled illusionists, convince us that their primary concern is our health, while their actions scream otherwise. Hello? These companies, in a feat of financial acrobatics that would make even the most audacious Wall Street trader blush, manage to spend more on marketing than on research and development. As if they're taking the old adage, the best medicine is laughter, quite literally, choosing to invest in the slick advertising campaigns rather than the actual medical breakthroughs. Let us not forget the magical act of off-labeling prescribing, where they take drugs approved for one ailment that mysteriously find their way into prescriptions for entirely unrelated conditions. It's a neat trick, people. Get approval for a niche market, then watch creative doctors expand your customer base exponentially. I love it. Who needs the tedious process of clinical trials when you can simply let imagination and profit motive run wild? Now, the piece de resistance in this grand performance, however, is the industry's steadfast refusal to pursue cures after all. Come on, where's the profit actually solving the problem? No, a far better solution is to keep customers paying and coming back for more, trapped in a perpetual cycle of treatment. It's the healthcare equivalent of planned obsolescence, except instead your iPhone battery is dying. It's your actual body dying. This grotesque pantomime of healthcare, we find ourselves not as patients, but unwitting participants in a vast ongoing experiment, where the one hypothesis is always, how much can we extract from human suffering? And the conclusion is invariably, more, 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 more. So here we are, folks, watching as the clowns of Big Pharma juggle with our lives, one hand in their billions. In one hand, they count their billions, and with the other, it would be almost admirable if this dedication to profit uber alles, if it wasn't so utterly devastatingly human. So, but fear not, for as long as there are ailments to exploit and wallets to empty, the show must and will go on. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe it's time for me to take my medication.
I like it.
I think I grew up with talk radio a little too much.
I can see like the George Carlin influence, definitely. I can feel that in there. But yeah, I like the word choices too. I think what's also really important that we do when we're faced with all these multiple convergent crises, like we have these increasing levels of diseases of despair as people become more impoverished as inequality increases, and as we see them invent new and more potent opioids, like going from what was the oxys, like when we were in high school, to the fentanyl, like where everybody's talking about now. And as we see the for-profit motive allow these companies to expand ever larger, influence politicians, deregulate themselves by writing the policy a lot of the times, lobbying to the point where they're able to do that if they don't just do it outright through backdoor deals. And when we see them, when we see that level of corruption, and we see this affecting 400,000 plus people, to the point that there is no one in America who doesn't know someone who's been affected by the opioid crisis, if they've not lost someone directly. I think the important thing that we should do is blame China blame immigrants bringing in fentanyl from China, and make sure that we oppose every form of safe injection sites or dealing with the problem that would admit that we have a drug abuse problem. And we should continue to treat it like a moral and individualist crisis and just say don't do drugs and just like laugh at the addicts who die from it. I think that's going to work out really great for us in the long run.
I totally agree, Mike. I think that's the best, most apathetic, most horrible thing that we could probably do. There's even in public bathrooms in some places, they started putting in this like red light or blue light to where junkies won't be able to find veins in the bathroom. And it's like Ozempic. You're not getting to the root of the problem.
The root of the problem,
You're just trying to find solutions to skirt around it and say, well, they're going to do it no matter what. It's twisted. It's totally twisted, and it's totally weird. There's plenty of countries in the world where there's not an outbreak in drug use or anything. Like, there's some drug use, but there's not this thing that's totally interlinked with poverty. So if you're poor, life sucks and you want to escape. This is the one thing that I know for sure.
One weird trick.
Yeah, it's the great magic trick. I get high and all of a sudden I'm better. Like I'm in a new universe almost.
I mean, I love that joke. I'm going to use that from now on. Anytime anyone complains about anything, I'm going to be like, hey, just do heroin. You won't care about it at all.
Yeah.
It won't bother you anymore.
Yeah, like, how do I get my car to not make this noise? Oh, I'll tell you. Heroin. You won't care about your car. In fact, you probably trade it for drugs.